Welcome to The Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by Animals in People Clothes. Let's dim the lights and start the show.
Welcome everybody to The Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Diamond Dogs Social Club, where the dog pound comes together to talk about stuff and sometimes nothing changes. Join the Diamond Dogs Social Club at your nearest FC. Welcome everybody to The Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And this is the film podcast where film nerds, filmmakers talk about film things and break it all down in ways that hopefully we get better at telling stories and appreciating films and shed a little light on how all that goes down as well. I don't really have a topic, a preamble topic, because we're doing a bonus episode at the end of this one. I figured unless there's something on your mind, then we could just jump straight into the fun.
No, I mean, so today we're covering The Witch from 2015. So if you haven't seen The Witch, pause this episode and go watch it because there will be spoilers all over the place. I mean, I guess the one thing that I will say at the beginning, now that we've already done the spoilers, is, and I think I texted you about 3/4 of the way through the film. I don't like doing films where children are hurt. And I don't think either of us realized, because we've both seen this movie.
I've seen it 3 times and I still, it doesn't come to mind.
And it just didn't, for whatever reason, I think it's because we don't really see it happen.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's never acted out on screen.
Right. So because we don't see it happen, we don't remember that it happened. But just so you know, some things do happen. If you don't like that kind of stuff, then maybe you can just listen to us talk about it rather than going see it, or fast forward through these moments or whatever. But yeah. So we're covering The Witch from 2015. So
absolutely. And on that note, we'll be talking about a lot of things. I'm sure at some point in the near future, we will discuss killing children in movies and all that entails. We'll also talk about some of the cinematography, natural lighting, setting up a new location. We'll also dive into some of the story and writing, sitting on a moment, Caleb, Thomasin, and some of the other witchy aspects of the film, and other such stuff and things and stuff.
And a quick synopsis of the film. A family in the 1630s New England is torn apart by the forces of witchcraft, black magic, and possession. Written and directed by Robert Eggers. Cinematography by Jarin Blaschke. Starring Anya Taylor as Joy. Starring Anya. Starring Anya Taylor-Joy as Thomasin. Ralph Ineson as father. Kate Dickie as mother. Harvey Scrimshaw as Caleb, and Ellie Grainger as Mercy.
Thomasin, listen to me. The bargain thou hast made is of no effect.
I made no bargain.
Thy soul belongeth to Christ.
I made no bargain.
The devil hath no interest in thee.
I am no witch, Father.
What did I but see in my house?
Will you not hear me?
I prithee, confess.
Why have you turned against me?
Christ can unwitch us if you will but speak truth to me. As I love thee, speak truth.
You asked me to speak truth.
I beg thee.
You and Mother planned to rid the farm of me. I heard you speak of it. Is that truth? You took of Mother's cup and let her rail at me. You confessed not till it was too late. Is that truth?
Please thee.
I will not.
I am thy father.
You are a hypocrite.
Hold thy tongue, daughter mine.
You took Caleb to the wood and let me take the blame of that too. Is that truth? You let Mother be as thy master. You cannot bring the crops to yield. You cannot hunt. Is that truth enough?
Enough.
Thou canst do nothing save cut wood.
Beg!
You will not hear me.
Must I hear the devil wag his tongue in thy mouth?
Ask the twins, then. Go on, ask them. They spend all day long babbling to that horned beast. They know well his voice.
Go to.
The adversary oft comes in the shape of a he-goat. And whispers, aye, whispers. He is Lucifer. You know it. The twins know it too.
Slander thy brethren no more.
It is they.
So before I even get your thoughts on the film, I feel like my feeling is you need to like take a big brain dump on the most emotionally compelling aspect of this movie for you. And if not, that's fine too. But I think I would just like to hear it and see where we go after that, which is killing kids in a movie. Like, it's obviously a very sensitive subject for you. And I'm assuming because you sent me a text at like, for me, I think it was like 1 or 2 a.m. And I heard my phone go off, turned over, went back to sleep, and then someone else hit me and I just forgot to freaking silence my phone, which is my fault. And then I was like, well, I'll just see who was texting me. And I was like, oh, it's Todd. Oh, it was Todd with the fire. Like, as you came, like fire and brimstone, Old Testament. I was like, oh shit. All right. Well, I'm sorry, man. I don't know.
No.
And so, yeah, you did not react well. And I had to I could not remember anyone dying in this movie other than, I mean, obviously I knew some people died, but I always think of the dad getting killed and her becoming a witch. And that's about the extent. Sometimes I'll remember Caleb. But for the most part, I think of those two moments, the goat and the witch. But yeah, so I'm assuming it was the baby that really like messed you up. If not, like, by all means, correct me. But yeah, by all means, take the floor, sir.
Well, sorry, because I'm 2 hours behind you.
Nah,
so I was watching late.
Day, bro, seriously, I like getting texts in the middle of the night. Like, that does not bother me whatsoever.
Okay, cool. Me either. But yeah, we've talked, I think, pretty much since Hereditary about like how,
I mean, since before. I can't remember the movie that triggered it, but whenever Hereditary came out, I was like, this one isn't for you.
Right.
Here's why. I gave you a big heads up. And the only reason you watched it was because a viewer requested it and you were like, I know it's coming. I think because I'm mentally prepared, I can handle a little bit better. And obviously that's such a rough movie that it helped. I cannot imagine it didn't, but at the same time, it's just gonna smack you in the face.
Yeah, I mean, this is a interesting. This is going to be an interesting conversation because both of those movies, this one and that one, I love. I think they're fantastic, they're amazing, and they wouldn't be as good without it. So it's an argument for it when necessary. So I get, yeah, I don't really have a whole lot big brain dump other than I just don't like it can be a great movie and I don't watch it. That's, I guess, what I have to say. I think that everybody has their triggers, right? My wife she has a trigger of like just anybody getting hurt, right? She doesn't like that at all. Mine is I'm okay with grown people. I don't respond well to kids, obviously, because I have to. But I think in this scenario with this film, Hereditary went a little over the line, I think, more so than this. But this one, I think it was very necessary because everything after it hinges on that happening. I think the hardest thing for me was seeing the one scene of like 10 seconds, seeing the baby and then seeing the knife and it cutting away. And then, the witch, bathing in it basically. Yeah. And I didn't remember that the baby never comes back. I thought at some point, they find the baby, right? But no, it's Caleb that they find, or that she sends back Caleb, not the baby. And so I don't necessarily know that there would be a better way, at all to like make you understand that the baby is gone for good.
Yeah.
I actually don't think there is a better way. I think that they did it perfectly well. I think that our the reason I texted you that was just because I was like, oh my God, I don't want to watch this stuff.
Yeah.
It was not, I don't like the movie or that this shouldn't have happened in the movie. The movie itself was unbelievable. Every time I've seen it probably 3 times now. And every time I see it, actually, no, I've only seen it twice. I saw it that first time and then I saw it this time. But both times I saw it, I was like, oh my God, this is so good. And I love that they speak in that tongue. And they stay there. That writing is just beautiful.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, did the language and the accents throw you off, or do you adjust pretty quickly to it?
I adjusted very quickly to it. And, if it wasn't a horror film, I would want my wife to watch it because, she can speak and write Middle English and read it. And not that this is Middle English. This really is like a little later than that.
Yeah, they call it Jacobean English, I think, or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I was trying to point, when was this? It was obviously, pre-Civil War, but I didn't know exactly when. But yeah, 1630s, that makes sense.
1630s, yeah.
Yeah.
Which
anyway,
I didn't know either, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, that's really it. I think that everybody has their thing. Some people can't watch war films. Some people can't watch scary films at all, like my wife. Some people just cannot, for whatever reason, watch rom-coms. That would be me too.
Great parallel to draw.
Yeah. Rom-coms and children dying. Yeah, it's pretty much the same thing. But yeah, so at the same time as I'm saying, I hate that, I don't ever want to see it. I think that it was necessary in a film like this to tell the story in the way that they did. And the acting, like Kate Dickie is, every time I see her, I'm scared of her. I'm just scared of her as a human being. Much less in this setting of, 1630s, early America, witchcraft and all that stuff.
She carries this severe gravity to her, right? Like at any moment she could command like your death or your life. Like you just don't know what's going to happen with her. And she just carries that with her. And I'm going to credit her performance for sure. Like she's gripping. She is, terrifying.
Absolutely. I think everybody really is. Ralph Ineson, his voice.
Yeah.
The first words in the movie are his voice. And I'm thinking, oh my God, is this a narrator? This guy is insanely, has an amazing accent or amazing voice. But that being said, the writing is fantastic. The acting is amazing. The story is really beautiful. I love that at the end, not at the beginning, but at the end, they tell you that this is based off of, research and findings of actual, not that this particular case happened, but things like this happen where fathers would accuse their daughters of being witches and either kill them or exile them or, things like that. Everyone thought that everybody was possessed if they were any different in any way, basically, which that goes into a whole nother conversation that I think we can probably have later. But that's what I would say. Fantastic film. I was in it from the very beginning and I never came out of it. There was never a scene that I thought shouldn't be there or was too long. There was never a delivery that I thought wasn't perfect and spot on. It was fantastic. We can keep talking about it, but I thought that they led into a lot of stuff really well. Like they led into the kids, basically, they led the goat in a really interesting way. The goat getting out and the kids playing with the goat and interacting with the goat a whole lot throughout the film. They led the father. That whole scene that you played was really great because we, as a father, especially in those times, your whole purpose is to care for and protect your family. And this guy couldn't do any of that. He couldn't do, like she said, you can't handle the crops, you can't handle hunting. All you're good for is cutting wood. And the whole time he's been, you see these piles of just wood. He's like, this is the only thing he's good at. So this is what he does, spends most of his time doing. And he just can't, he can't accept that. And she just throws it on him right then, and he still can't accept it, but he knows that she's right. But they led into that really well throughout the film. And there's a lot of different things that they lead into really well. They don't just like introduce something. If we hadn't seen him cutting wood throughout the whole film, we wouldn't necessarily know that. If we hadn't seen the piles, like, then she could just have said, you do this and you do that, and it doesn't hold as much weight. But yeah, I thought that the writing was fantastic, and the story led right into where we knew it was going to, or didn't know, but right into where it felt right for her to say those things, and then at the end for her to like, submit essentially, after having to kill her mother. Like, you're thinking, okay, what's going to happen? We stay with her really well. It all just leads really well.
So well said. Yeah, I think, just to add on to what you're saying, like, I have my sensitivities as well. Like, I have a pretty high tolerance for violence on screen. I have an extraordinarily small amount of tolerance for actual real world violence. Even when it comes to like medical procedures, I can't watch it. That's going to give me nightmares for years, if not the rest of my life. Like, I just cannot do it. But yet, yeah, you blow someone's head off, in a zombie movie, and I'm just like, oh, that was cool. And I just move right on with my life. Those things, and that's been that way since I was a kid. Like, I've never been able to handle like medical stuff, but I've bathed in, the blood of, I'm sure, many innocent screen victims. It just doesn't get to me at all. And so for me, I do probably have a little more intolerance than I used to, from the standpoint of, to your point, this story really does hinge on all of those moments. Like, you can't remove any of these moments and still have it add up to the same motivations, the same results, the same amount of suspense and fear and antagonism between the characters, without every single one of these things happening. And so for me, that's kind of the litmus test: is this happening, whatever it is on screen? Is this happening just for the shock of it? Or is this happening, because it's going to add up to something? And if it's just for the shock of it, it better be a really fun experience and a really fun movie. Then I'll go along with it. And even then, you have to figure out ways to dial it back. If you go listen to last week's episode, like, there's a really like over the top, silly, shocking thing, and they had to really ride the line on how to make sure it's entertainment without violating the viewer. Like, that's a very delicate dance to do. And obviously in this case, I felt like, yeah, this adds up. And to your point, it wasn't gratuitous. Like, they show you and then they just kind of show you the aftermath. They don't actually. And I think I was having a slight nightmare hitting play, because I was like, I can't remember how they killed the baby. Are they going to actually cut the baby up? And I was like really afraid, because I didn't want to see that. Like, that's definitely getting at my tolerance level. And so I was really glad that, yeah, they just cut away and we're just watching her, like you said, literally like bathe herself in it. And it's still very gross and like detestable, especially with the chaotic noise and music and whatnot. But I love the point you made a minute ago, though, and it did not dawn on me until you said it. Like, the fact that they waited until at the end of the movie to add, this is all based on real events and real dialogue and real court and journals and etc. Like, what a brilliant way to leave the audience, because it's two different approaches to the same idea. Like, if we set it up beforehand, maybe the idea would be we make people a little bit more terrified as they're watching it. Whereas if you do it at the end, they walk away more terrified. Now you're leaving them with the horror that this is the kind of stuff that happened in families and in communities back then. And now you have to walk away from the theater with that knowledge and replaying everything in your head. Like, that's a level of psychological warfare that most movies don't care to do. They would rather get their nickel's worth while you're in the seat, instead of saying, nope, I'm going to send you home terrified. Like, that's so much better. I love that touch, man. Really, really great point.
Yeah, because if you think about it, like, the craziest stuff happens at the end. So, if you're telling them, if the first thing that you say is this kind of stuff really happened, and then it takes 45 minutes for anything creepy to happen, or 30 minutes for anything creepy to happen, that's 30 minutes of normal stuff happening. So it's diluted so much, but then at the end you see all this crazy stuff and you're like, wow, I'm so glad this isn't real. Right? Yeah, right. The final scene, she's like floating. I'm so glad this isn't real. This didn't happen. She didn't just kill her father, and this goat isn't Satan, and all this stuff. And then, oh, this is actually based on true shit. Oh, crap. And lights, like, see ya. Have a good trip home. Like, yeah, it's actually really, like you said, really brilliant. It's this other side of the coin, I guess. I don't know, but yeah,
freaking genius. I have more questions coming up for you, and I'll come back to those here in a minute. Because some of the cinematography, I just started Googling while watching it. I watched it twice today, once for me and then once to take notes. And I just kept getting this itch, like, how did they light this thing or whatever? And so I'll touch on that here in like 10 seconds, but there's a mix, right, of handheld and locked off shots and crane moves or dolly moves, probably, because they shot this way remote Canada. Like, for tax breaks, they went out into this deserted, like, population. It's called Kiosk, somewhere around Ontario, I think, but really remote. And that meant probably carting all your gear up there, because it's not like you're going to run to the rental store, on your lunch break. And so, yeah, all the stuff that they had was probably meant to be as minimalist as possible. I don't know that they would bring a lot of cranes out there. If they do, it's probably like, we're going to schedule all our shots around this crane because this thing is massive, and we just can't afford to keep it out here for 10 weeks or however long the shoot was. But they also have a decent amount of handheld that they insert here and there, especially when we're looking at like Black Phillip. The kids are chasing him around, or if we're kind of chasing the kids around. I love some of those shots because it takes on this kind of human animal stalking vibe that you can insert into the film, the aesthetic. It's kind of fun, and it makes you just feel like you're being hunted, I guess. A lot of pushing moves, which creates a lot of sense of inevitability, dread. And overall, the film is pretty desaturated, right? It's almost like they left it in raw. Like, hey, we're going to shoot it in log and, just cut it that way. You know what? It still looks good. Like, let's go.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it, actually.
But obviously they graded it, because why wouldn't you? But you do that, right, to just create the sense of dreariness and the abandon. You're out. There's no life in the visuals, and that just kind of adds to their desolation and everything that they're struggling with. Right, food. Like, they're worried about starving. They're about to ship their daughter off to some other farm just because they can't hack it. As you said, he is not a very equipped man to provide for his family, which adds to his list of sins, which we will definitely come back to if I can remember, because I didn't actually write notes, but there's stuff I want to talk about.
Okay.
Soft lighting, so incredibly soft. Like, despite where you spend so much time outdoors, they keep it so soft. And apparently they shot, and this is going to put me down a real rabbit hole, but with natural light, right? Basically, we're going to shoot with just the available light outside, and inside in the indoors, the only lighting we'll use is candles, which they found, like, these triple wick candles that obviously 3 wicks, 3 times the light, allowed them to, get a lot more light to light the sets on those interior night scenes. But I just don't buy it. I mean, I don't think they didn't have lights on set. Not to say that they didn't shoot 95% of this without any added lighting. But I'm just watching some of these exterior night sequences, and I'm like, how would you light this without exterior lighting? That just does not make, the moon is not that bright, especially if you're shooting with an Arri Alexa. I can't imagine in 2015 that the RE shot higher than like an 800 ISO. I mean, maybe a 1600 if you want to push it, but with, you know, these lenses, I don't see how it was possible, because at certain scenes, I think Thomasin walks outside and she's holding these candles, and that's clearly lighting her face, which is fair. But then she has this massive rim lighting that's lighting the background, lighting the house. This is not a day for night shot as far as I can tell. And because I'm just looking at some of the shadows, and I'm like, there's zero lighting in there, and the fall off, the roll off was just way too strong. I don't know. I can't imagine that they were able to shoot everything without external lighting or some added lighting for the exterior.
Definitely not. There was some spotlight stuff that I was like, no, they absolutely used lighting for that.
They had to break out like a couple HMIs, if only for like 3 or 4 scenes, because he's chopping wood in pure moonlight, and like he is just heavily backlit. And yeah, I don't know. So that's my asterisk. That said, this movie is very much the way I would want to shoot. And it's comforting me after I started looking, you know, up like, did they? Because I was feeling like, man, this feels like it's all like natural lighting. It's primarily available lighting. And I love shooting that way. And it was really comfortable to say that they had like a $4 million budget and still chose, like, because of where we're shooting on location and all these other reasons, the time period, it just makes sense to shoot with the sun, and it looks gorgeous. And for that, I mean, you use a lot of diffusion, right? Where you can break out large silks. Now, I don't know if they were able to break out like these 100, 200 foot silks, but to ease some of the roll off, but maybe it's just really overcast. I don't know. It's about picking your time of day and picking your location. With that, right, there's a lot of negative fill where if you want to create dimension, you need some shadow. Shadows aren't bad. And the way you create shadow kind of helps determine how much depth you're creating on your subjects. And so if the shadow is more towards the camera and the light is on the other side of the actor. So if you imagine like an actor, looking across camera, the right side is a little bit brighter than the side near to the camera. Well, to do that, right, you can either create negative fill, which would be like a big black canvas that you set up behind the camera in order to cut down light that's bouncing back onto their face. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it would just be to pick your location. Like if you want to do that, maybe shoot right next to the forest so that the camera is shooting out from the forest, and that's creating your negative fill. It's cutting down all the bounce. And so there's a lot of ways you can do that. And I assume they played with all those things. Some of them, once you get too wide, there's a limit. Like there's a shot early on that we watched the cart kind of walk off. The carriage. Thank you. I died of dysentery. Sorry. So the Oregon Trail like exits into the distance. That we get way too wide. There's no way, they're able to do any negative fill. And so you're just letting the scene be what it is. And it still looks beautiful. And yeah, so I imagine they're working with all of that. And anytime they're shooting indoors, you'll notice that we're always shooting into the light, right? We're always going to be shooting into a window, into a doorway. And that lets the light be the primary way to shape the scene and create that depth, create the dimension, and also create all this soft fall off. If you ever want a beautiful picture, you don't have any lighting, well, sit next to a window when the sun is not shining directly into it, and you'll just get this nice, beautiful softbox effect that's going to create. And so that's what they're doing throughout this entire movie is every interior shot that's in the day, let's shoot into the window and try it as much as possible to capture that. It's not to say that they don't ever shoot from the window's perspective, but it's always going to be a little bit easier if you're shooting into the light. It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
It's minimalistic.
The shot, particularly the shot when Caleb is sick or, up in the attic area, whatever, they shoot towards when we're seeing Caleb and mother, and then away when we're seeing father, when he's talking about we're going to go into town tomorrow and whatever, but they're using that light from the window as the fill, for him, and they're using it almost as a backlight. But yeah, I guarantee they probably use a bounce or something to, bounce that light back onto mother, because she'd be pretty dark.
Yeah, for her close-ups. Yeah, and so you call that a reverse key whenever you have the light coming from the opposite side of the camera, shooting into the camera. That's called a reverse key. And then when you go into some of these close-ups, like you just said, all you got to do is bring in like a little bounce to fill in the shadows on someone's face. But then whenever you're really wide, you can do one of two things, just depending on the day and depending on the look. You can either, one, drape the entire wall behind you, behind the camera, in black. And now that's going to cut all the bounce down and you create a really dramatic, heavily silhouetted look. Or you can probably just bring in a bunch of white fill, and now you have a ton of bounce so you can see all the actors. And because of the nature of light, because you're bouncing it, the light source, because you're reflecting it right back into itself, you can't overpower the original light source. It's going to die down. And so you're not going to create new shadows because that's just not the way light works. It dies the further it goes in our atmosphere. Yeah.
Cool.
So
that's awesome.
Yeah. It gives me hope when I start thinking about, I want to shoot the way I want to shoot. It can be done. It takes like some planning and, some taste. But yeah, very doable.
And not just understanding of light and how it reacts, but understanding of how it reacts to your camera, right? Because, if you're shooting on an ARRI, it's going to be different, and primes, it's going to be different than shooting on a C100, right? It's going to be different than shooting on a Red, but maybe an ARRI and a Red are probably, because they're both very expensive cameras, is probably a little similar. But, if you're going to shoot with an iPhone, which you totally can, maybe the amount of light you need is going to be different than the amount of light you would need if you're shooting with an ARRI or something like that, right?
Totally. Like the ability for some of these high-end cameras to reduce noise and grain, even though they're shooting, let's say, my camera, my C100 Mark II, shooting at an 850 ISO versus the ARRI Alexa shooting at an 850 or even 800 ISO. Like the sensor is just so much better, and the way it processes the image is so much better, along with what it outputs, its own codec, is so much better. And that's why those are much more expensive cameras. I could take the same lenses I shoot on and just have a much better image come out of the ARRI Alexa, just because, for one, the data is capturing so much more data. Those files are so much bigger, so that whenever you dump them into your colorist, like, he can do a lot with that, with all that data that's in there. Whereas when you start pushing around the colors and the exposure from my C100 Mark II, you don't get nearly as much latitude, the ability to pull and push the image around and to pull certain colors and push certain colors, just because my camera, I think brand new, costs like $6,000, and theirs brand new is like, I don't know, 30 or 40 at least. And early days was even like 60, 70. I think on the higher end, maybe even 90. But regardless, like, there's a reason those cost more. It doesn't necessarily by default put out the best image. Like, it wouldn't make sense for me to go and buy one of those because my clients don't want or need that much post-processing. If you're not going to spend the time in post coloring and grading and really maximizing that, it does not make sense to go and buy that kind of camera. But if you have a colorist you're going to throw 20 grand at, yeah, go do that, man. And that'll change the way you shoot and the way you process all of that footage. Makes a lot of sense.
Awesome. Yeah. Especially when you're shooting a film like this, right? With like low contrast, but natural lighting. That's got to be really difficult for a camera. Because, I've thought about lighting for a while for movies, right? And you think, oh, we just throw a light up, but it's different. It's so specific. It's not like you standing there and seeing it with your eyes. The amount of light that your eyes need is so much less than what a sensor from a camera is going to need. And so, or in a lot of ways, right? And so when you're lighting a dark something that's low contrast, but like natural light, you have to do it in a very specific way for the camera, because the camera isn't a human eye. And so I have to remind myself that a lot, like on set of oh, this is going to take this much time to do this. And it's necessary because the camera needs it, not necessarily because a person, your eyes would need it. It might actually not look good to you on set, right? Mm-hmm. It might to you, like if you're just standing there not looking at the monitor, it might actually not look very good. And I think we learned that a lot. If you anybody listening, if you go back and you listen to the Blade Runner episode, there's a lot of this kind of thing in there where it's like, we'd look at it and we'd be like, we would take the thing out of the tent and it was like what? This looks like crap, but in there it looks really good. And it's all about whatever you have to do for the camera and not necessarily for your eye. And I always have to remember that when I'm on set and it's taking forever to get the lighting right and stuff like that. So.
Absolutely. No. And I would just add on to that, like it is possible to get from my camera to capture the same level of quality as what you're seeing in The Witch. The problem isn't the camera. The problem is my ability to create that image within my camera without all the added processes. Because if I know this is what I'm trying to create, now the challenge is on to me to go and shape the light in the exact way that I want to end up with. And so I guess my point being, the worse your camera is at processing later, the better you need to be at doing it in camera. Like if you can shape the light and stage everything exactly the way you want in camera, there's no reason you can't have, a $4 million budget looking film on whatever your crummy, C, whatever. The Mark V?
Mark V, yeah. Mark D. Well, yeah. I mean, Roger Deakins can make an iPhone look like an RE, probably. That's right. Yep. Right. It's the same. I heard one time that I used to be a heavy golfer, and Lee Trevino was one of the greatest golfers of all time. I heard that he one time made a bet with a guy he could beat him with a putter. He could play an entire round and beat him with a putter, and he did. So, yeah, if you're that good, you can beat somebody with a putter. You don't need all your clubs. Well, if you're Roger Deakins, you can make an iPhone look like an RE, right?
That's right.
Right.
I love that. Cinematography wise, it popped out at me that we started in this little community and quickly transitioned into this new location. And I was just really interested in how they set up this new location in a very quick, seamless way without wasting a lot of time. And they start with, obviously they get excommunicated, and we just watch the town fade away, right? We sit and just watch as we're pulled through the town, these old buildings, and they even have like Native Americans walking around, and we're being cast out, which is confirmed when they lock the gate, right? It's this huge, massive gate swings shut, and you can see them locking it as it closes. And so we have this one shot. Two shot, we watch them leave town and they slowly ride into the distance, and we just kind of sit on that moment. And then we cut to a campfire. We're watching them just kind of make do, clearly not where they're headed. And then a big, massive landscape countryside shot. Nobody's in it. It's just the country. And then suddenly the father's kissing the ground and their family is worshiping God at a new location. And then we cut to house, and there's a shed outside, and there's huge woods, and there's a harvest, right? And just suddenly in these very quick sequence, we've set them in a new location and passed time, like a huge amount of time, enough for them to build all this stuff and to raise a harvest. That's pretty impressive. That guy, I mean, he could do something, I guess, even if it's going to get him killed in the end. Like,
he can chop wood.
He can chop wood. Get that timber. And so moving into story and writing, I appreciate, especially watching, this past couple times, they have a few very classic horror elements that is just so like almost tropey and cliche, but they insert it in ways that just really, really work. I mean, the silliest one, and forgive me for this one, but it's just the use of the word boo. Like they literally have someone saying boo. And the way they use it though is to entertain a baby, right? That's the scene where Thomasin is like just, closing her eyes, covering her face, and saying boo. And that's where the baby vanishes, of course. But I love that she's literally saying boo, which is as classic as it gets in Halloween times, right? And I also love that shot after the baby vanishes. It's an empty blanket, and we tilt up, and we see like the weeds moving and the brushes wiggling in the back, and you just get this feeling that something just swept by everything, and it was too fast for the eye to catch. And it's just freaking perfect. I love the creepy old women, right? It's this is very classic horror, like witches on brooms, right? And that's effectively what they do. Instead of like a pure broom though, they use more of like a stick with some leaves on it, and it's just freaking cool. And of course, towards the end of the film, you have the old woman in the manger, right, snacking on the white goat, and she turns and starts cackling. That's like just perfect. Like it's so out of nowhere, and it fits. And it's just as creepy. Of course, this is not a classic horror trope. But when we cut to the indoor and we see the crow picking at the mom's breast, that's really disturbing. Like it's so good. It's so gross.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's so creepy.
It's
so
just
good.
So delighted at it. Another really classic horror element is all the ghost noises. They built the soundtrack off of all these really classic, ooh, and it freaking works, man. And this gets into another question I wanted to throw at you in terms of, what you thought about the audio and the sound. I wanted to throw out and hear what you thought about some of the audio and sound. Like I briefly looked into some of the music, and they used a nickel harpa, which is like a Swedish bowed viola from the Middle Ages, and apparently used like this really huge, massive bow to play it or something. I've never heard of a nickel harpa, if I'm even pronouncing that right. And they also use they weren't happy with that, with just that. They also wanted like women, and so they found this all woman choir called the Element Choir, and they specialize in improvising. And apparently he would just give them cues like, hey, I want you to be kind of quiet for the first 30 seconds, and at about 35, I want you just screeching like banshees, like really go crazy for 5 seconds, and then go silent. And he would just say, let them take it away. And they were very experienced. And so I don't know, what did you think overall? Did you have any feelings or thoughts about like the music?
I mean, that's exactly what I thought happened. It's exactly, I was like, they just got a bunch of women to just like sing and then scream. That's exactly what I thought. I thought it was beautiful and perfect. A lot of times in movies like this, you'll hear some kind of weird, if not weird, just played interestingly, played in a different way, a bowed instrument. And I think that a lot of the reason for that is because a bowed instrument can be played beautifully, or it can be played really, really dynamically or really aggressively. So you can physically, with your hands, create something that's angry very easily, right next to something that's beautiful. You just dig in a little bit more, or you bow a little bit faster, or, you hit another string along with the string that you're hitting. So maybe you hit 2 or 3 strings if you press hard enough. So you can really, or you can hit it, right? So things like violas and cellos and violins are there's a reason why a violin is like a lead instrument in a symphony. It can literally do anything, right? And so you, when in films like this, or in films like Hereditary, and I'm just comparing it to it because you'll hear a lot of, hell, even look at Halloween. There's a lot of bowed sounds that happen that are like lead pieces, and that you can't really replace with like a horn, because obviously a horn can be, different horns can be played in different dynamic ways and in different styles, of course. But there's an element of humanity in a horn. You have to breathe through it. It's just, it's like a totally different style of instrument in that regard. But a bowed instrument, you can kind of remove the humanity from it in a way, but still keep it in the playing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like anybody, you could have a machine play it, or I don't know, but I love that they stuck with that kind of stuff. And I thought the Foley was fantastic. I felt like the music was removed in perfect moments, right? It was very quiet in a lot of places, and I felt it, I felt it without noticing it.
Yeah.
It was just placed very perfectly. When do we need music? Okay, then we're going to put a piece in here. We don't need it here. It's actually better to be quiet here. So we're going to pull it out completely, or we're just going to hear the women a little bit right here. And that's it, or whatever. It was just because the women also they sound like people, but they don't sound like a normal woman's choir. They sound like a separated individuals trying to conjure something, whatever that might be. That's what I felt,
That's cool.
They're trying for something, right? I think a choir, if you think of a choir, you think of a group of people who are so together that they can't help but sing the same piece. They've already found it, but it feels like they were searching to try to make something. They're searching for this thing, like that, and at some points they would find it and it'd come together and then it'd fall apart again. It's just so eerie and all over the place. I just absolutely adored it. So strong.
That's freaking cool. That's such an interesting point, because I see exactly what you mean. I played trumpet in high school, but you're right. It's such a different using your strength to overwhelm the instrument in ways that can be so just quick, and there's no transition, right? It's just organic, the way that you can go from playing something sweet into crushing it into multiple strings. Like that transition is so much more seamless than you'd probably get out of like a horned instrument. And I love that point you made about the humanity that goes into wind instruments as opposed to like bowed ones, stringed instruments. Freaking cool, man. Great note. Also loved the whisper at the end, the devil's whisper, because it just sounded huge and engulfing, but quiet. It was like this very quiet, controlled power, and the enunciation was absolutely perfect. There wasn't a wasted articulation whatsoever. He said precisely what he wants to say, and you just get this feeling of like he speaks in contract, right? It's just beautiful.
I shall guide thy hand. It's just, oh God, and so good.
And that quick cut after he says that is
you don't expect it. You don't know. Wait, what just happened? You just have to collect yourself for a minute and think, oh shit, she just signed something. Oh damn. Okay, all right,
here we go.
Wow,
freaking cool. Just a couple more notes here. This, to me, I would classify this as somewhat of a gothic horror. Like there's usually there often is a slightly romantic aspect to gothic horror, even if there's no actual romance in the film. There is this kind of beauty to it. This obviously is not that, but for me, it has all the other necessary elements that brings me into this kind of gothic horror aspect, which is there's usually some kind of supernatural element and omens. Often there's some kind of maiden, the virgin maiden kind of woman, and very often you're isolated, right? You're usually around some creepy old mansion or estate. In this case, it's, a creepy old house. And at the heart of it, I think the most important aspect, aside from those other things, is the drama. It's all family politics. It's all family drama. And that's the entirety of this movie, is all about the politics of the family. And with that, like Caleb, let's talk about Caleb for a second. He was such an interesting character for the short time he's on screen. He does a great job. Like you said earlier, man, everyone crushes it. And he's fantastic. And he amuses me so much though, because he likes looking at Thomasin's boobs, and that's just hilarious to me. But I think it's important. It's not there, just to be lewd, or to say, oh, he's a boy. But it's to indicate two things. One, she's growing up. But also he's growing up, except he's growing up with no prospects now that he's without community, right? He's getting all these hormones. He's becoming a young man, and he has no outlet for that. And the only person in his age group, is his sister. And what else is he going to do? This is how bad things start, in the countryside.
And it's the 1630s. So I'm sure that that probably happened a lot more than it does now.
I believe that. I completely agree with that. And he, of course, that I think we get two kind of cleavage shots. One when he's waking up in the morning, and then he wakes her up out of a nightmare, which sent me mentally down this weird tangential rabbit hole of is it good to wake people up out of nightmares, or is it bad? And I think we would all agree good. It's good to pull someone out, but I just found that interesting because you're saving someone from themselves. Like a nightmare to some degree or another is you either preparing yourself, if you want to look at it, mechanistically as a profitable thing that we do as humans, or just terrorizing yourself for whatever reason. And I just find it really interesting that if you wake someone up out of a nightmare, you're saving them from themselves. I have nowhere else to go with that. It just was
awesome.
Weird.
Yeah.
And then later by the river, right, he just has this kind of Bill and Ted moment where he's just staring down her blouse.
Not even responding to her.
She's like, yo, and he's like, whoa, hey, well, what's that over there, bug? And so but I think those moments do pay off later, because later he stumbles across the witch of the woods and is seduced by her, and he's terrified but also seduced. He knows, but he doesn't know. And I love that little sequence. It calls back to, wow, this is a real woman. Like if I was impressed with my sister, like this one is really impressive, right? She's gorgeous. And I love this whole sequence because there's no dialogue. We just watched him get pulled in, and the music is all the direction, all the dialogue that we need, is this inevitable downfall that he's being pulled into. And it's just a gorgeous sequence and painful to watch at the same time. I love it. It's creepy. And
then the creepy hand is perfect.
And then we have his death sequence, where he's up in the attic, or AKA their bedroom. And it's chaos, but it's organized chaos. Like all these beats happen in their proper time. It's not just stuff happening all at once. It's very lined and organized. They allow these moments to unfold, right? He can't open his mouth, and they pry it open, and he spits out this rotten apple, which at first coming out of his mouth, it looks like an eyeball. And then it hits the floor and it turns into this apple. That's a really great little head game that you play with the audience, because you're like, oh no, he's spitting out an eye. And then you look at it, no, it's an apple. And you feel like, did I see that wrong? Did I misremember something? I don't know. Honestly, I mean, I just watched it twice and I still don't know. I didn't pause it. I didn't want to cheat. I just wanted to kind of let the experience roll through. And I was like, I still don't know what I saw.
Something shiny, I guess, that might have looked like the white of an eye. But I thought the same thing, that it was an eye.
And then boom, rotten apple.
Yeah.
And then after that, immediately, right, the twins accuse Thomasin of being a witch. And I love this little moment with Jonas and Mercy. Everyone starts praying, because Thomasin is now getting the third degree from her dad, and she's having to confess her love for God and all that stuff. And then they start praying, and Jonas and Mercy you start saying, I cannot remember my prayer, nor I. And you're just like, oh, you little shits. Like, I hate you so much.
I know.
It's so freaking good.
They're the worst. Yeah.
They are the worst. And then Caleb freaks out, right? And he seems to recover, right? He's fine and he's rejoicing and take me to thy lap. And he dies. And it's just weird, beautiful sequence with him because it feels so strange. And but because of the dialect and the time period and their fervent belief in God and the way they confess everything, like it plays so well. It's this weird little thing that's happening for me as I'm watching that sequence. But I love that entirety. That entire sequence is fantastic because it's all performance based. Like there's no CG wizardry. Like it's really just people reacting to people and the camera moving in and accentuating certain moments. Like it's all performance based and it's all absolutely riveting. Freaking A, man.
Absolutely. It's amazing. I mean, and their responses to him too, not just him, but everyone's reactions to him, the father, the mother. Oh my gosh. She, I mean, the way that she's destroyed the entire film is so perfect. I mean, her character development, to just, to degrade so perfectly in like this linear fashion throughout the whole film until the very end where she's like attacking Thomasin is just amazing. It's just a clinic in acting. I think she's probably one of my favorite scary film actresses. Yeah. Really, like I don't know. I can't tell you anybody else that I think is like scarier than she is just being on camera. And then to be that good of an actress is just fantastic. Because acting is reacting, right? Mm-hmm. And the reaction to the child going missing, starting it, but she's not completely off the rails by it, right? But then losing another one, and then just like losing a daughter because she thinks that she's a witch. Like just her responses are just subtly beautiful in all of her reactions to everything that happens. Even to learning about that she's been lied to about her cup, her reaction to father about that, just beautiful. So well done.
Kills it. And yeah, that brings me to one of the last things, which is, men in this film are killed, males are killed, women are recruited. It's really interesting. I think that's not without intention. The baby is a little boy, right? So it's a male baby, and it gets killed. Caleb is killed. Father is killed by Black Phillip himself, right? And he utters this line as he's about to die: "Corruption, thou art my father." And it calls back to a lot of things. One of which is what he tells Caleb, which is, "We will conquer this wilderness. It will not consume us." And I think ultimately that kind of points back to his pride, the pride that got him ejected from the community in the first place. They talk about in that opening scene, he does, "We travailed a vast ocean for what? Was it not for the pure and faithful dispensation of the gospels and the kingdom of God?" And they're like, "Hey, you don't judge us, we judge you." And he's, "I cannot be judged by false Christians." And they ask him, "Must you dishonor laws of the commonwealth and the church with your prideful conceit?" And I forget what he says after that. It's something like, "If that's the way it's got to be, then yeah, I'm happy to." Like it was ultimately, it was his sin of pride that led to their downfall, their demise. It's all because of his pride. And that's ultimately also what she's telling to him. Like he never once owned up to his mistakes until it was too late, until it was way after the fact. He could never humble himself enough to say, "Hey, here's what's happening. I sold your cup because of XYZ. I left the community and everyone's miserable because of it." The father got everybody killed. And I don't think it was a coincidence that Black Phillip himself is who kills father, which is this, Satan, the devil, kills dad, and it's one patriarch killing another patriarch. And ultimately, I think that's why women are recruited. Black Phillip does not have any desire for competition in his house. He only wants women for, I don't know, whatever reason, symbolically probably. But yeah, so you can lay all of this down at the father's hand for sure. And then after he dies, mom fights Thomasin, right? And she gets killed. She accuses Thomasin of bewitching her brother, right? She calls her a whore. And it gets back into this puritanical arguments and all those elements that are just steeped in this movie. And I love how we sit on moments before proceeding. And this happens throughout the film, but even especially in this fight sequence, which is just like heartrending, because you have mom who's beating on Thomasin, right? And music ramps up and she's forced to make a decision. She grabs a knife and cuts her mom. And then we just sit on this. Mom pulls back into the camera. She's bleeding. She starts bleeding on Thomasin, and she slowly reacts, realizing what just happened, and attacks Thomasin with the intent to clearly kill her, which, as you said earlier, leaves no choice for Thomasin but to kill her mom. And she grabs the knife again and just goes to town. But we sit on that moment too, as it's all happening. We're watching the Thomasin just react to what her life is slowly fading away before she does it, retaliates. And then after she kills her, we cut to this wide shot of the house, and mom is laying dead on top of Thomasin. And we just sit there for ages. No movement, no camera movement, she breathes. That's the only movement we can see, and it's so faint, so small. You might even wonder if she's still alive, but we know she is. Until she finally dumps her mom's body to the side and stands up. And I love that, because letting these moments sit and digest incredibly slowly helps keep them from becoming cartoony. And it just adds a lot of weight, and weight adds horror. Like, that adds this dimension of reality and grounded. And it's all about just letting your actors in the moment just sit and breathe. Literally, sometimes that's all that's happening. When she's sitting on top of her, we're literally letting the moment sit and breathe. And it's great directing. It's why Robert Eggert was able to write this kind of movie, is because he's the kind of person that could execute this kind of movie, because of that patience. And some directors really just do not have that kind of patience. And that's part of their style. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, right? Michael Bay is going to thrill you most of the time. And that's part of his style. He's not about the patience. He's about, like, let's create interesting moments and visual moments and bang, 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 and keep you excited. And this is about letting the horror sit on top of you, and not let you escape it. You don't get to escape this moment of horror. And that's his approach for sure.
That's amazing. And then even after that, staying with her. Like some of my favorite moments in cinema are not the moments of the action. They're the moments after the action. Of like, what happens then? Because so many times in a movie or a book or something like that, you see the action happen, and then you see, the reaction of something else happening later on, or to someone else somewhere else. But staying with the person after the action, that's life. That's real life, right? Okay, she just killed her mom. Now what does she do? Oh, she goes inside, takes off her dress, and then falls asleep. Okay, that's a thing. That's a thing that you can do. I mean, yeah. And for anybody who hasn't seen the Hereditary episode, go watch Hereditary. Like, there's so many great moments that blow my mind that are not full of action. They're full of reaction to an action. It's so good. So good.
Great point.
Good points.
Last little tidbits. Once again, for the umpteenth time, the performances are terrific. I don't have much to add here. Anya Taylor-Joy is a force. Just watching her, the first time I was like, oh, she's the next big thing. Like, she's just owning every moment she's on screen. She is absolutely, entrancing. And I love that final moment of joy as she floats into the air. And it's such a weird thing to find comfort in the arms of the devil whenever she was spending her whole time feeling low in front of God. Like, it's crazy. She felt light, she felt free, and she felt joy overwhelming her as she, was embraced in, with her tribe of women.
Dude, such a great point. Wow.
And it's just a beautiful idea. And I know that's supposed to be the most terrorizing aspect of the film, is that she joins Satan. But the crazy part is just how much more, or how demonic and evil was and oppressive was her own dad, was, the church, for her in her life, as compared to what she was going into. Not to say that they don't have blood on their hands. They literally killed a baby, and bathed in its blood. But that just little moment of I don't know, freedom, was just awesome. And watching her react to that and just kind of imbibe almost, right, was beautiful. And it was just uninhibited, carefree. You could feel the wildness, and the freedom just kind of flooding over her, and it was just perfect. Last little tidbit here, which is just so random. Black Phillip, I loved. So I got to see and meet one of the main producers behind this film, Javen Hoy. A long time ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, he did a workshop. Sundance Labs came through town. They held a bunch of panels. He was on one of the panels, and he talks about making this movie and how arduous some of it was, and difficult and fun, and the attention to detail that Robert Eggert brought. And I mean, they built the sets from nothing. And if I remember correctly, Jay was even saying, Mr. Van Hoy was even saying that they built the set out of the tools they would have had access to at the time that this was set in. So like, okay, we're not just gonna construct everything to look like it. We're gonna build it with the authenticity that it would have been built in. Like that's born out of Eggers has a background in production, set design. Like, this is the kind of stuff that he did. He built sets for theater, and I guess he got frustrated with no one's ever going to come see this, and so eventually he moved into film. And he was an actor, so he has a great appreciation for performance, which is why he cast a bunch of nobodies. Like, if you hadn't seen Game of Thrones and really paid attention to background characters, you wouldn't probably recognize anybody in this film. Like the father played one of the marauders next to, I don't know, an Ironborn guy. And the mother ruled on in one section of the film, of that series. Like, now they're more or less background characters. They had good parts. Don't get me wrong. You could see that they were terrific actors on set, but it wasn't like they were, carrying the torch of all the hope of Thorndale or whatever that Westeros was called. Like, I don't know. That's all I'm saying to me. But because I think he has such a background in acting, he was able to see these are terrific actors. They'll get the casting that I think that's the thing that I've noticed as an actor. Whenever I cast so differently from casting directors even, and from other directors who don't have a background in acting. Like, I look for different things, and it's much more emotional. I am emotionally trying to dial into the performances and see, are they carrying anything behind it? Anyway, one of the things Jay also mentioned was Black Phillip, the goat, was a massive pain in the ass to work with. And I pulled up some articles just out of curiosity. I was like, what else is everybody else saying? And apparently the father got rammed by the goat. They were constantly fighting throughout the sets, not just the grand sequence. But he rammed him in the ribs and dislodged a tendon. And
wow.
For, like he said, the final 5 weeks, he was on painkillers for the shoot. Yeah, just brutal. And often he just would not cooperate. When they needed them to be like active, he would just lay about. When they needed him to just sit and chill, he'd be running around fighting people. And so they actually abandoned a few scenes that they had written to shoot with him, apparently. But I will say he nailed that scene where he rears up right after attacking the father. He does this little rear up. He freaking nails it. And he did that a few times for him. And it was just funny reading how the DP and the director viewed working with the goat versus the trainer who they hired the goat through. And they were like, no, he did a great job. He was the star of the show. Like to her, like Black Phillip performed exactly as needed. And to them, they were like, man, he just freaking pain in the ass.
So the scene where the father was cursing him after he gets stabbed, that's probably a pretty easy scene for him to do.
That came
right?
natural. Yeah. They had too many takes.
And it's interesting you say that they abandoned a few scenes. Now that you say that, I could probably notice that. Not know what scenes that they removed, but notice like they didn't have a lot of Black Phillip in it.
Yeah.
I mean, they had just enough, right? Just enough, but it might have turned out to be good because you don't really think of, a black goat is, I know, a symbol, right, of the devil, but you don't really think of okay, he's going to inhabit this goat, right? I mean, I see it, and we have a few scenes of him within, and you talk about it a few times about him possibly being Satan, but it's not like jammed down your throat too much, right? So that was probably a good thing that they ended up cutting out a couple of scenes because, you don't really think about it too much so when it turns out to be the devil, you're like, oh shit. Like when he got rammed by the goat, it scared the crap out of me. That was the most startling moment, startling meaning making me jump of the whole film, really. Yeah.
Agreed.
Anyway,
that's a really good point. I think you're right. If they had added probably those extra, whatever, let's call it 2 more scenes with Black Phillip doing XYZ, you might start to feel maybe there is more to Black Phillip because you only see him a few times, and really there's one close up in particular where they're all locked in together, right? And the twins are questioning Thomasin and she's questioning them, trying to get a feel for each other. You can feel the wall between them. And she's like, does Black Phillip really whisper to you? And then we cut to this close up of Black Phillip and he just kind of stares at her for a second, then shifts his head to kind of get a better look at her. And it's epic. I'm just like, oh
it's so good.
God, he might
be a great
be
moment.
Sentient. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm afraid. Nice. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much all I got. Any final thoughts, quandaries?
No, great film. Really well written, really well acted, perfectly directed, and the cinematography is amazing. Lighting's fantastic. I mean, whatever you want from a movie, this is definitely that, and then some, for sure. Just be wary of the child violence, but other than that, I mean, it was necessary. Again, I'll just bookend this by saying this was necessary, more so than probably any other movie that has child violence in it. Because most of the time I think that's unnecessary. But in this case, I feel like it was necessary. So yeah, I loved it. I adored it.
Awesome. Concurred. So what are you going to recommend this week?
I'm going to stick with the witch theme, but I'm going to go way back. And I recommend The Wizard of Oz, 1939. I just remember loving this movie as a kid, and then as an adult watching it and just thinking how beautiful it is, and if you'd never seen it before, the transition to color was just so like vivid, especially in the 30s, that had to be like such an amazing experience to see in a theater happen. And yeah, there's, so, we're almost 100 years, we're 80 years later. So there are some things about it that are a little bit kooky, but I just thought it was such a beautiful story on so many levels, and really amazing film, especially for the time. So, Dude, Wizard of Oz.
Nicely done. I'm going to recommend, let me double check that we haven't. No. Good. A little film called Green Room. It's just, if you need a scary movie that's not subtle, but still kind of traps you into a small space, this is a great movie. Like, you will cringe at least 4 or 5 times, and also just go through a wild ride of emotions. So go check that out. Green Room.
Awesome.
Stay tuned next week. We are going to be diving into, hopefully, if nothing else in the world breaks again, we will finally get to take a look at Dune and see what that's all about. Only been, a year and a half of waiting. My God, this better be meticulous. They had so much extra time to work on this.
Yes.
I hope they took advantage. Anyway, stay tuned for that next week. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, subscribe, drop us a review, leave us a note. If there's something you want us to cover, the kind of things you find interesting, let us know. If you want to comment on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/thewitch with a W.
And the quote of the day is from Arthur Miller. Betrayal is the only truth that sticks. What was he talking about with that?
To be honest, I don't know. But I pulled him out because he's a famous playwright. He wrote a lot of films. Death of a Salesman, maybe his second most famous is probably The Crucible. And The Crucible is all about the Salem witch trials, right? And what I loved about, and what everyone loves about The Crucible, is the way that he was able to use something from a long time ago as an analogy and as a parallel for what was happening in contemporary times. Because the Crucible, right, the Salem witch trials is all about accusing someone of being a witch, and you take them to task, and you basically try to get them killed. And the same thing, a similar thing was happening. I mean, this is why we call these a witch hunt, is during his time. And I want to say like the 50s and 60s, there was the Red Scare, right? Communism was infiltrating America, and therefore communists need to be rooted out. And so you had McCarthyism that was taking place, where he would pull people into these public trials before Congress and accuse them and whatever. There was a lot of blackballing that was happening in Hollywood. Hollywood participated in this. And there's a great movie called Trumbo that dives into this, about how their beliefs got them blackballed from working, from like participating in their careers. And even people who didn't care, still found them unacceptable to work with, because politically it was not feasible to be associated with these people anymore. And so Trumbo, of course, started writing under pseudonyms and, ghostwriting for people. And that's such a good movie. If you like Bryan Cranston, really go watch Trumbo. It's not as boring as it probably sounds. I was hesitant because that does not sound, politically, it sounds like a movie I would like, but the time period, it just sounded boring to me. But I watched it for Bryan Cranston, and I stayed for Bryan Cranston. My God.
He's amazing.
He's amazing. But yeah, and so I just loved, so I started looking up quotes from Arthur Miller because of, him writing The Crucible, and the way that you can use the witch to look at a variety of things, whether it's the patriarchy, body horror, right? There's elements of body horror in this, with accusing her and finding her unacceptable because that, she's coming into her own, and she's growing into a woman. And because of that, because she's now a woman, she's automatically a temptress for her brother. I mean, it's just all kinds of layers and elements that you can tease out of this. And so I just started looking up quotes from him, and the idea that he puts forth, like, betrayal is the only truth that sticks. And obviously this film is filled with people betraying each other, and ultimately that's what they feel, and that's what they remember, even whenever it's not real. And that was one of the things that I really pulled out of this film, which is in modern society, and this film would have been ahead of its time, an accusation is guilt. it doesn't matter if you're
Yeah.
guilty. In today's environment, accusation itself is guilt. And so hopefully, we're all a little slow to judge in today's times. I would hope for, anybody that I know that got accused of something, you're probably going to get the benefit of the doubt from me. And I feel like society could use a little bit more of that than not. I don't know. That didn't really tie together.
Yeah,
very
no,
well.
you're totally right. You're totally right. And I think that and I think, part of what you're talking about is the Me Too movement in a way, not just that specifically, but let's just use that as an example.
Sure.
Where if someone gets accused of, do something physical, with a woman, you're no matter what, you're going to take the woman's side. And that's just it. I think that a lot of that, whether that's true or not, has to do with the way that society changes. Society, in a lot of ways, overcorrects things, right? It's kind of like a seesaw. In order to find a balance, if you're like this and one side is all the way down, one side is all the way up, you got to go the other way too far.
Yeah.
And then you go you find an
balance.
equilibrium eventually. So, I feel like in that regard, for a while, it's going to be this way, where if you're accused, then you are guilty of it. But eventually I feel like the balance is going to be found,
I agree.
And yeah, anyway, that's all I'll say about that. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, those are necessary movements and necessary
100%.
conversations to be having, whether it's, Me Too or racism, police brutality. There's just so many things that, because we've lived on the wrong side of the spectrum for so long, we probably do need to test the boundaries and push further before we come back and find out, okay, this is the healthy medium.
100%. 100%. I mean, and if for no other reason, scare the crap out of men.
Yeah,
absolutely. Do it. Because if somebody is accused of it, I mean, there's a lot of it happens, and nobody has for hundreds of years it's happened, and no one has gotten either caught or punished or anything. So for something like that, it deserves overreaction. Racism, racist in any racism in any regard should be overcorrection. There should be overcorrection for sure, so that kind of thing should be understood. It is not acceptable. Right. And then when people start reacting to the fact that it's not acceptable, then you start to find an equilibrium. Reacting meaning they don't do it anymore. Right.
Yeah.
Essentially. Yeah. The non-reaction, I guess.
Yeah.
I think we're on the same page.
I mean, I think the vast majority of people to be honest, that wasn't at all the conversation that I had in mind whenever I was thinking these things. That's, really fun. Because it's 1,000 things. Like there's never it, but I think most of us do a good job of, when we're offended, we keep it to ourselves. It's like, that's fine. I don't have to be friends with this person. I don't have to follow this person online. We just unfollow. Like, I think 90% of us do that. But the 10% are the ones that are loudest. Like, they're the ones who get all the attention. And this gets into a whole other discussion about the news media cycle and how this stuff gets perpetuated. But yeah, I think I do want to circle back and kind of correct myself, because I do think we're all fairly good at this stuff already, and we're just going to get better. Yeah. Agreed. Well, this has been fun. Yeah. Absolutely. This has been great. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us for this episode of The Witch. Hopefully that you enjoyed it, and make sure to join us next week where we're covering Dune. That one's going to be super fun. And please subscribe and review us on iTunes and share us with your friends. It all matters, and it all helps us continue this. We continue anyway, but it makes us feel like actually we're making a dent in something, doing something that matters, and we love doing it as well. Yes. So until next time, I'm Todd. I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies.